I am Sherry Naudine, owner of Collegiate Sports Advocate, and with me today, one of my favorite coaches in the past, Don Stopa, who was with University of North Dakota. Don, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to be here. It's great to see you again, even though it's not in person. But I've loved talking with you in the past, so look to enjoy that again today. But I just wrapped up a year ago a 25-year collegiate coaching career. Which actually, expanded to 30 because I started in the club ranks like a lot of, my friends and my peers. But with that journey, it started in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, where I was born and raised. Believe it or not, in the early 90s with club baseball, believe it or not, we started a program that was unique. We were not part of Little League. We were not part of ABCA, pick your letter alphabet. We joined them all. And then we ran around the country, like Canada and the US, playing tournaments. And then at the end of those tournament seasons, which World Series did we qualify for? Which one do we want to go to? Does that sound kind of familiar to the club model of softball now?
Well, we're 100%.
And we were innovators there, and it was with a bunch of Canadian kids. And we played all over the US, and that's how I got my start, which led me to my first college job in 1999. When I got a phone call, hey, I need a pitching coach. And back then I was coaching baseball, even though I started playing fast pitch as a kid, but it was a baseball pitching job. He said, hey, need a pitching coach. You want to come? Well, in 18 days, I quit my job, paid off all my bills, rented out my condo, sold my car, and got the cash the day my flight left for Miami, Oklahoma. So I went from Vancouver to Miami. The coaching career started there. And, I got the bug. And I did media as my studies because in 18 days, I'm not getting a visa to work. So I actually traveled as a student. So I got a scholarship. I'd been to college part-time, but quit for a good paying job. Well, this was a new offer. I just dropped everything for a very small work study position and a free education. And that's where I got my start in coaching. And I went from that little school in Oklahoma to a small 4-year in Iowa. I got back into softball because there's TAing for the softball coach. And he's like, hey, I really like working with you. How would you like to be my associate head coach next year? And I said, well, part-time assistant baseball job to a full-time softball job, I'm in. And my father was a big player. I've been on this game my whole life, so I know softball. Got in there, got doing that. The next year he retired. So my 4th year of college coaching, I was a head coach.
And which university was that, Coach?
That was at Graceland University, tiny little NAIA school in Lamoni, Iowa. The weather map on the nightly news, Lamoni's at the bottom of the map. That's how people know Lamoni.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then where did that take you?
Well, I was there for 5 years, and then I went on to Arizona because my wife at the time was doing some graduate studies, and the University of Arizona picked her up. So we packed our bags and moved out to Arizona and into Tucson, which is not a bad place to be for softball. The only job I can get in town was to return to the baseball ranks, where I got another pitching coach job. But the softball coach every year, when are you going to leave that sport and come join me? Well, on year 3, I did. And it was amazing because softball there is unbelievable. We had 7 assistant coaches at a junior college, and all of them were former players at the U of A. So we got some great people. Armando Quiroz was the head coach at the time. His daughter is now the head coach, and he's helping her out with Becca.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Oh, and they were so awesome. They still are good friends because they're amazing people. Great coaches. No answers about that. They win. But as people, awesome people. So I did that for a few years, and then the head coaching bug came back, and I ended up at a junior college in North Carolina at Lewisburg College. So I got the job there, did that for a few years, got the NCAA bug, and ended up in Minnesota, Crookston, where, part of the U of M system, get a job there, head coaching. Enjoyed my time. One of the smallest campuses in the country, but it's a Big 12 degree or Big 10 degree at the end of the day for the kids. So, it feels good to play competitive D2 ball, but walk out with a big school degree. That was awesome. We broke like 100 school records in the first 2 years I was there. So the kids were starving for it, and they got it. And then, 4 years after that program, I got my D1 bug, ended up with the University of North Dakota for 6 years, where I finished my career.
Awesome. And that's where we met. And I love the relationship. I think there's a couple key things in there. Relationships matter in this sport, in life, and the people and the quality of the people, right? And I've always said, there's a bunch of good people over here and there's a bunch of not so good people over here. And once you pick that route, you got to kind of live in that world, right? That's amazing. So over the time, how has recruiting changed?
Well, that's such a interesting question. I started out in junior college where everybody's, well, there's no rules. You do whatever you want. No, there are rules. The enforcement is the difference there. There's not as much enforcement. It's the same thing with the NAIA. So a lot of the free for all in recruiting there, but you needed it because, you're going after JUCO kids. Well, you want the kids that could play at a 4-year. So I'm talking to kids, well, I want a 4-year. So then I get to the 4-year. Well, I want NCAA because I was at NAIA. And then I get to D2. Well, I want D1. So I'm like, oh my gosh, finally I got to D1. Well, I want Power 5, now 4. So you're always having to work harder than the next person. And that's what recruiting is. And the way the game's changing now, there's so much misinformation out there every single day. Like, it's impossible for a coach or a family to know everything, because I get 2 email updates every single day on the D1 administrative side of the world. And it's all sports, not just our sport of softball. And the information changes nonstop. So what's changing in recruiting is you got to pay attention. You really have to. Finding players is easy. Okay, we all can see talent. Then we meet the kid, great kid. Then we meet the family, great family. That stuff's all easy. But getting them on the sign on the dotted line, that's the tough part.
Definitely.
Everybody, no offense, you're not, but everybody thinks that they are Power 4. Okay, and I wish you all were, and some of them are, obviously. We know who those kids are, but that's not the right place for everybody.
Well, I love the comments when they say, but I batted against a girl that's committed Power 4, or I, struck her out, and they compare themselves in a very small capsule instead of the national viewpoint, right? They don't know what they don't know because they've never seen it.
Yeah, and we all love the kids from the big programs. They play great competition all the time. But how do I know that one at bat was a difference maker in your career, or was that the best at bat or best strikeout you've ever had in your career? So you really got to get out there and see them. And that was the toughest part about being at the D1 level. There's a lot of restrictions, which are awesome. But I spoke up at the national convention a couple of years ago, and I took a lot of crap for it, because they're talking about adding to the recruiting calendar and giving coaches more time off. I agree with that, because as a Division I assistant coach, I have zero control over my schedule. I'm told when to go and where to go. You work 360 days a year, 16, 18-hour days in the recruiting season. So it's a lot of tough work. It's not for everybody. I loved it. Okay. It wasn't for the money, because trust me, it's not there. I loved what I did. But it's very, very difficult when you don't control your schedule. So that's when I spoke out at the national convention. Some people patted me on the back because I said, you're exactly right. Some people said, you don't like it, quit. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm talking for a lot of people.
Right.
And I spoke up, and it was not fun. There's 1,500 people in a room at the summit, and I step up to the mic for the first time.
Great. And what did you say?
Well, I said there is no such thing as a work-life balance in college athletics for coaching. It's a work balance. And I'm a father of 2. And what I spoke at the convention, a lot of people really praised me for, is I said, I became a statistic 3 years ago. I never wanted to be a Division I coach because all my friends are on marriage 2, 3, or 4. 2 years into my Division I career, I was statistic. I was divorced. And I'm not saying that softball is what ruined it, but was a big part of it.
Right.
And there is no work-life balance. We talk about it nonstop, and it's another key word I'm going to talk about in a second here that we talk about all the time in college athletics. There's no such thing as work-life balance.
Correct.
The head coaches, some of them are amazing. Their staffs are incredibly happy because they have a bit of a work-life balance. Some programs, no, it's a work plus more work balance.
Right, because most of them are horribly underfunded, and people don't get that. So that might lead you into the next thought, which is that you have to do camps and you have to find other ways to do clinic work or, guest speaking work, right, to earn a living. But that means even more not life family balance, because now you're working in addition to your commitment to your team, but now you have to do, go hustle the camp, right?
Yeah, and camps are a big part of it. Now I'm the oddity. I enjoy it. I love doing skill work. It's so much fun. And being a jack of all trades, I've been a pitching coach, I've been an outfielding coach, I've been the infielding coach. I love the mental approach. That's when I went back to college, my master's. Sports psychology, just went, wow, this is so cool. So I've had to do it all. So I enjoy going to camp, especially when I get to, your camp. You're like, well, what group do you want to work with today? I don't know, pick one for me.
Yeah.
Infielders is where I want to be, because that's my favorite, but I can do anything and everything because I've worked at small colleges where I've had to be, for example, my first coaching job as a head coach, I had no paid assistants. I had a couple buddies that played slow pitch that came and helped me. I had a former player, and she was still living in the town. That was my assistant coaches. So there's not always a staff to do it. And even many the mid majors right now, you're allowed to have 3 full-time assistant coaches, director of ops, blah, blah, blah. A lot of those coaches have one assistant. They don't have all those other spots.
Right. I mean, as you know, my daughter was in D3 at the beginning. My son, she had to get certified to come help her preseason. She had no coaches. She had no assistants. Now she's in D2. She has one assistant to do everything that they expect him to do.
Yeah, and a lot of those small colleges, it's even tougher because, the D3 NAIA route, a lot of them are told you got to carry 35, 40 kids, run a little mock JV schedule. Mm-hmm. So now you have more bodies with no coaches and oftentimes, unfortunately, no budget. We need you to carry a JV team, but you have no money for travel, no money for uniforms. You can't feed the kids. So they're trying to host a couple junior college games each year, which is free recruiting. And,
right.
Pay for it.
Right.
So those coaches that are working at the grassroots, a lot of JUCOs, NAIs, D3s, and a lot of, unfortunately, D2s, they're having to hustle, which once again goes back to the question, less work-life balance.
Right. And then not only that, but respecting their time and their love of the game. And what I'm seeing, and I'll transition here and ask you a couple other questions, but what I'm seeing now is, man, the parents and the kids are beating down the coaches. They're just looking for any gap to be upset, to be disgruntled, to ask for more money, it's just this give me more environment. And that's just not across all conferences and divisions. So what do you see is the biggest issue now for student athletes trying to go to play softball in college?
Money. We all think there's a full pot everywhere and we're going to get paid. The NIL thing is amazing for student athletes, but we understand it's a couple sports that are getting the real money. You take a look at the House settlement right now, it's up to $20.5 million of revenue sharing. Okay. Well, no, it's up to, okay. The biggest of the biggest, they're finding ways to squeak around that 20.5 because it's not enough. Everybody else out there we have a 0.5 pot that's going to specific sports. So everybody's assuming you're going to get paid. You're not. Even the scholarships now with the new roster limits going to 25, schools can offer up to 25 scholarships. Many schools that are D1s, there's still D1s out there with 7 or 8 scholarships. They still have 7 or 8, even though they can offer 25. Some schools were fully funded at the 12 prior to the House settlement. And guess what? They still have 12. They don't have 25. The biggest and the best, they have all 25. Right. So they're going to continue to be the biggest and the best. But all of the other schools at the Division I level don't have that 25.
Well, you and I were talking about misinformation at the beginning of our chat, right? And there was a young lady trying to help student athletes, giving free advice up on Twitter and quoting the old standards, that there's 12 scholarships for, all D1, and that's a better, bigger, elite experience. And I private messaged her because I appreciate everybody trying to help anybody that'll listen. And just kind of said, hey, a lot of this has changed and, we've got to educate everybody properly. So if you had to tell parents today, what advice do you have for them about getting their student athletes ready to play in college and getting recruited?
There's really a couple avenues they can go. There's a lot of people out there that can help them. There's paid services. There's some that I guess are sort of free, or you can do all the work on your own, which is a lot of work, or pay somebody. Some families have the money to pay for it. Do it. It's not a problem. Some families don't. Then you just got to dig in and do a lot of work. It's not easy to get out there and get it done. But my advice is you got to keep all your options open. We all want every one of our kids to be a Power 4 stud, playing for Miss Gasso and winning national championships. I would love to be a part of that program myself, but it's not a reality for everyone.
Right.
So don't have, like, my biggest advice, don't have a closed and narrow thought of where you're going, where you belong. Because at the end of the day, none of us are making large paychecks playing this game.
Right.
You've got 4 years for a potentially discounted education. Okay. After that, you're doing something else. Because even look at the best and the best of our sport. None of them are making millions. None.
Correct.
And if they are, it's not from softball. So, like,
and just to add to what you said, there is we always say at Collegiate Sports Advocate, go where you're valued, and you're going to know the difference when a coach comes in and values you, but you wanted to go to the West, or you wanted to go south, or you wanted to play at a football school. The kids feel disappointed, and I'm like, you're one of 8,000 kids in the whole country that will play at any level. Go where you're valued and enjoy that, because when you come out of your softball world, as you mentioned, and you have to go get a job, being a student athlete, the life skills you've learned along the way are priceless.
Well, and the relationships that you're making is amazing. Like, people say, what's the best thing I got out of coaching for 25 years? Is the relationships. No ands or buts. 2 weeks ago, for my day job, I was at a convention and I had a free evening off. I went out for pizza with a couple of my former players, okay, because I was in their city at that time. That's cool. Seeing the weddings, getting invitations to weddings, stuff like that. That's what my job was so cool about. And it's the same thing for the kids. This whole transfer world we have now, you don't like it, go somewhere else. Well, we have players that have played for me that have got their best friends, bridesmaids, whatever, because they spent 4 years, 5 years hanging out with this group. Well, if you're transferring every year, you're not making great relationships, you're just making more.
Right.
And that's the tough part of it, is the whole transfer culture is tough too.
So would you say that the transfer culture is the biggest challenge in the process now, or was it, the big COVID, or was it the roster caps? What's been the biggest change in the process?
I really think the transfer culture, because it is a trickle down. Everybody wants to be the best of the best, and I get it. I don't have a problem with that. And not every school is the right place for every kid. Because understand the recruiting process. Me as the coach, I'm telling the family and the kid everything they need to hear about my program that's amazing. What's the family doing? Telling me everything that's amazing about their kid and their family. When we get to meet up all of a sudden in September and start practicing, it's not all poops and giggles anymore. Okay, it's time to get to work. And some of those coaches aren't as nice as they were during the interview process.
Right.
So not every place is the right place for every kid. And I get that.
Touch on the travel ball culture too. Like, how is it helping it or hurting it? Are you seeing a change in the travel ball culture because of this transfer world?
I do, because it is like, there's how many kids out there now? Well, I didn't play enough, I'm going to a new club. I didn't like coach, I'm going to a new club. My stats were 550, they need to be 560, I'm going to a new club. And they see it on the internet with the big kids every year, because Division I softball is the best of the best. Well, if we've got players that are transferring out all the time, well, why can't I do that with my club team? Or I want to go to the University of Arkansas. They only watch the Mojo, so I'm only going to play for the Mojo now because I want to go to Arkansas. So there's millions of reasons for them to transfer, just like college, and it's getting tough. Yes. It's hard to follow as a coach because you never know where a kid's playing.
Right. And I always tell families that what your travel ball coach's responsibility is to prepare you to play at the next level, not necessarily be that one of those 51,000 that call coaches every day and say, Coach, I got this kid for you. Let me tell you about this kid. Because I think people underestimate how much you guys know about what talent is needed at your level. They think they can call you and sell you a kid. I find that insulting. My job is to get you to come see my kids play, not to convince you that some kid has some stat from some weekend when, and this is a joke I've always said, where they played the Sorry Sisters of Texas, and so they got 8 home runs and now they're a big star. It's just not relevant.
Well, yeah, and there's the trust factor in the recruiting world. I've got to know people out there that I trust when they say, hey, you've got to see this kid. Hopefully that kid's already on my radar, but if not, if somebody says it, I'm going to go take a look at that kid. Well, there's other times I've been told, hey, you got to look at this whole team I've got, and I get there and there's not one kid that's ready for my level. And that's their job, as you said, is to get them ready for that level. But some of the coaches, it's the same idea. Understand who your roster is.
Right.
We all want the best of the best for our kids between the parents and the coaches. That's why they do this. Okay. But reality at some point might need to be checked.
So let's do rapid fire to wrap this up. I'm going to give you a real quick ask for advice and give it to me quick, and I'm going to get you the next one. So in one sentence, what's the greatest advice you could give to the NCAA right now about making the recruiting process better?
We've got to settle down and get something solid and done.
All right. Yeah. So next one.
One sentence.
One sentence. What advice do you have for student athletes today to be better at the recruiting process?
Get to know what they really want, not what's the best of the best. What do you really want? Whether it's a degree, playing time, whatever. What do you want? Not dad, not coach, not anybody. What do you want?
Next one. What one advice do you have to the parents?
Settle down. There's a lot of information out there. You've got to process it. You've got to see what's out there, but be real and settle down a little bit.
And last but not least, to your peer group that you've left after 25 years, what one bit of advice do you have to them?
Love the game. I did it for 25 years, not for a paycheck, because I love the game and I love the kids. So if you don't love the game, don't do it.
And I love you and have for many, many years. And I want to thank you today for coming on. And I know you've got something coming up next. So I'm going to let you take this and tease it and launch what's coming up next. So parents and families and everybody in the sports, stay tuned to what Coach Stopa is going to do next.